Hi everyone, here we are for the final lesson of this mini course. Let's get straight into it, saying upfront that in this video we are going to look at how to assign basic materials to objects by managing some of the information in the material editor. Finally, we'll also look at how to use mapping coordinates of objects to correctly assign textures. Let's begin straight away with our now famous scene devoid of any kind of material and access the material editor by clicking on the icon shown. This window is equipped with numerous tools, but as usual we'll only focus on the things that interest us for now. To start off, observe the set of slots located in the upper parts of the screen. These will gather the individual materials that we are going to use in the scene. We select the first slot and give it a name by entering in the specific space shown. Please note that it's always a good practice to name the materials you create, even though 3ds Max assigns a name by default. Then go to the diffuse options, highlighted on the screen. Here we can click on the gray box to select a color to be assigned to an object. So for the floor material, let's try to select a green color. Now we select the floor in our scene, and finally to assign the material we click on the icon highlighted on the screen. So that's done, the material has been assigned to the object and we are aware of it thanks to the little triangles that appear in the corners of the material slot. Actually, it would be possible to assign the material by dragging the slot onto an object, but it's always good practice to use the method shown earlier, given that in a complex scene it's difficult to relieve the material on the right object using drag and drop. If instead we want to remove a material from the select object and from the material slot, we just click on the highlighted icon and on the next screen select the first option. And there you go. As you can see, the material has been deleted both in the scene and in the material editor, but the association of the object hasn't moved. Now let's bring everything back to normal. Now we'll create a second material for the wall using a texture. In this case, we click on the blank square next to the diffuse slot, and in the following screen we select the bitmap option. From here we can load the image that we are going to use as a texture to apply to the object. For those who don't know, a texture acts as a covering fitted to an object and helps to create realistic materials. When we import textures, they are shown in the material editor as a node or branch connected to the root, which is represented by the material. Here, for example, we are in the texture node options, and to go back to the root of the material, we simply have to click on the icon highlighted. To return again to the texture node, just click again on the little square next to the diffuse slot, which is now occupied by an M, identifying that a map is present. Now, if we apply the material to the wall, nothing appears to happen in the scene. Don't worry, to save memory, Max doesn't allow the textures to be viewed in the scene by default. To see them, we need to activate a command. If we click on Show Shaded Material in Viewport, we can activate the texture in the scene. As I mentioned earlier, textures are maps that are made to fit onto the objects. When we assign a material with a texture to an object, by default 3ds Max fit the texture to the object according to the present mapping coordinates. However, to start off, we must say that the present coordinates do not always allow the texture to be viewed correctly. Those coordinates also force the texture to adapt to the object. every time the object is changed, therefore damaging the scale, or as we can see, for example, if we scale the object, to solve this problem, we have to make the object's mapping coordinates independent so that we can decide how to manage them. To do that, we need to use a modifier, the UVW Map. A modifier is a tool that can be linked to an object that allows us to manage an aspect of an object itself rather than its standard parameters, as with a UVW map, for instance. There are many modifiers in 3ds Max which can be set through the Modify tab in the command panel in the drop-down selection menu shown in this scene. So let's assign the UVW Map Modifier to the Object box. I'll start by saying that this modifier allows to assign different kinds of mapping to the object, as you can see in the highlighted area. We won't go into the characteristics of every single mapping method, but limit ourselves to stressing that in our case, as in the most cases, you'll find yourselves during the V-Ray course. The two most commonly used modes will be planar and box. Let's look in detail at what planar and box mapping mean. Box being the one we'll use for our example. Planar mapping in fact behaves like a projection plane from which the texture is projected onto the object. If the plane moves and the projection angle changes, the distribution of the texture on the object also changes according to the projection. Box mapping, on the other hand, is nothing more than a three-dimensional variation of the planar. Basically, it's a rectangular prism that is around the object, whatever shape it is, and all the faces of this rectangular prism project the texture onto the object. If we change the orientation of the faces, the projection is adjusted according to the position. Good. So let's return to our example and use box mapping. As we saw in the previous example, we can distribute and orient the texture onto the object by using the Move, Rotate and Scale tools. We can also do the same thing using some parameters. But if we use the Move, Rotate and Scale tools, we first have to click on the UVW Map Modifier positioned on the object. Once selected, we can repeat the earlier operations to better fit the texture to the rectangular prism. To finish off, let's look how to acquire the mapping coordinates already used for one object and duplicate them onto the second object. In fact, let's select the second object and assign a UVW Map Modifier to it. We then move down to its cascading menu and stop at the Acquire option. We then click on the first box and pause for a second on the dialog box that opens. The system asks us if we want to carry out a relative or absolute acquisition. Leave the relative selection active and click on OK to see what happens. So we assign the material to the object and see that the settings related to the size of the texture have been captured by the acquisition. But the distribution of the texture is still the default, with the tiles positioned vertically. We can therefore intuitively gather that absolute acquisition not only captures the size value of the texture, but also the distribution values. Perfect, that's really everything. Our 3ds Max mini course ends here. I'm Daniel Krampitz and I wish you a good workshop. Bye.